Tight morning. If you're visiting with us, we're glad to have you and invite you to come back with us again sometime. We're lesson 20 out of 23, so we got 3 more after today. We'll wrap up this first part of the life of Christ and then move right into the next quarter, following right behind that. So, all right, let's do a little review and pick up, and then we'll get into our lesson this morning. We started in the way we break out in the life of Christ into the period of retirement, where he does several different retirements, pulls off to here, pulls off to there. And we'll see some of those start unfolding this morning. We're in that period of the life now. So he sent the 12 out on the limited commission. They come back and tell him all that's gone on with it. And he's been very popular with the crowd, so much so that I think he can't talk to his apostles like he wants to and teach them. So I think that's why he pulls them off to these side places to have time to spend more with them. So the first of this, they go to Bethsaida, which is on the northeast part of the Sea of Galilee. And the crowd's following there. There's just a couple of shots of the terrain around there. The time, according to John chapter 6, is around the Passover, which will be our late March, early April time frame. 55,000 it's the only miracle we got that's covered in all 4 of the epistles, so keep that in mind. So the people's been with him, and he's been teaching them, and it's late in the day, and he says he has compassion, the word's used there. We'll see that word again used this morning with the 4,000. So he tells the apostles, it's time to eat. Give them something to eat. And they said, what are we going to give them? I have anything to feed this many people. So they have these 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. And so Jesus has all the people to sit down and on the grass. And he blesses it. I'll get that in here. Gives thanks for it, blesses it, and gives it to the apostles, and they distribute it out to the people. And the last line on the slide says that everybody had as much as they wanted. So this is not just a little, everybody gets a little bite type thing of sharing. It's a matter of they were filled. How would they want it? And they had 12 baskets full left over of scraps. They had more scraps than they finished than they did start with. So indeed, a miracle was done by Jesus, feeding this many people with this small amount of food. But should we be surprised? I mean, what have we seen him do already? So many different things like this. Miracles of various kinds. And we'll get this morning into signs and people wanting a sign from him. Well, think of all these signs he thinks he's already done that people just all be stacking up in their minds type thing. And we'll also take this physical food he fed them here with this today, and in our class today, last part of John 6, we'll talk about the spiritual aspect of that food. But now they want to make him king. So, and we talked about, hey, you're a good king. He can feed the people, and he can teach good lessons and provides for them, and certainly can take them away from Rome's control. But that's not what he came for. That was not what his mission was. His mission was to save the people from their sins. So he sends the apostles away, and they get a boat, and they leave, and Jesus goes up into a mountain to pray by himself. And we talked a little bit about this king thing. It's a spiritual thing. He's a king over a spiritual realm. He had no intentions then or any time being a king over a physical realm type thing. I was talking to Mike and Marsha after class, and I had this thing here. He is our king. He's our king. This is from Revelation chapter 19. He is King of kings and Lord of lords. He is our king, spiritually. Not like they would physically make him a king. A couple more shots of the Sea of Galilee. We talked about this a little bit, the terrain here, as this deep gorge comes down through the Sea of Galilee and Dead Sea and on down to the Gulf down here. Trent made a comment, if you see this physically, it was like a bowl, this bowl of water sitting out there, more or less, down in this gorge type thing here. But the disciples leave, they're going across the the Sea of Galilee there in a boat. And the water is about 200 feet deep, and we did some contrast and talked about that last time. And then the storm comes down on the sea. We've talked about storms before when Jesus stilled the tempest. Excuse me. And how sudden they can come in and how strong and the tempest can be there. And they were greatly distressed. They were scared because of the storm. So in the very, very early hours of the morning, Jesus comes to them walking on the water in the midst of the storm. And they see this figure coming to them. They think it's a ghost, so they're afraid. So he tells them, it's I. Don't be afraid. And Peter speaks up and says, if you see Master, let me come walking on the water. Jesus says, come on. So Peter steps out onto the water and takes a few steps toward Jesus. Looks around, sees the waves coming at him, takes his eyes off of Jesus, and he begins to sink. And he cries out, Lord, save me. And Jesus does, reaches out, gets him, and says, where is your faith? Where is your faith, Peter? We'll contrast this little faith we've seen several times as Jesus taught his apostles to a great faith we'll get to in a few minutes. So they get in the boat, the storm is calmed, and they come out again to this statement we talked about before. Truly, without a doubt, this is the Son of God. And we'll see a statement made like that later on in the lesson this morning. So the question is, when do we begin to sink? Well, we talked about taking our eyes off Jesus. When we stop looking at Jesus, Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. When we stop looking at Jesus, then we're going to start sinking ourselves. Peter, that the fear overcome his faith. Hebrews 12 is just after the great chapter on faith. And he tells them to lay aside the sin, lay aside the weight that's holding you down, and run with endurance this race looking to Jesus, which means continuous, patient perseverance as we run our daily lives. So, getting into this morning's lesson, we're going to be in John chapter 6. That's just a little introduction here. So that's the bulk of our lesson this morning will be from there. So Matthew 14 and Mark 6, the very last part of each chapter, they land over on the northwest side of the Sea of Galilee at Gennesareth, which is here. Capernaum's up here, which we looked at a lot before. Bethsaida over here. That's where we've been most of the time. So now we're down here at Gennesareth, a little farther down on the sea. And the people there recognize who it is. I mean, it's this part of Galilee, and so they recognize Jesus. And word starts getting out everywhere, and when it does, what do you think is going to happen? Well, they want all the people healed, because that's what he's been doing, is healing the sick and raising the dead and all these other things he's been doing. So they start bringing their people in to be healed from them. Just to touch the hem of his garment, that they may be healed. Now, meanwhile, back where they were, the 5,000, this crowd realizes that the disciples have gotten a boat and left, but Jesus didn't leave. He went up into the mountain, remember? So they wonder where he is. They go back around the sea there, come down looking for him, and he's there. Because remember, he came walking on the water and came across with the apostles. So they said, how? When did you come here? How'd you get here? You didn't leave in a boat. So they're trying to figure that all out. So now he starts talking to them. He starts making the beginning of this contrast between spiritual and physical. We're going to see a lot of that in the rest of John 6 this morning. He said, you come looking for me for the signs. You want to come and be healed. I mean, you didn't come for the signs. You want to come for the food. You came because of the physical food I gave you. That's what you came looking for. But what are the signs really for? The signs were to show who he is spiritually. And that's what he wants them to understand. Who he is. He's the Christ. And you need to be thinking about that part. So, when John 6 now, starting in verse 27, and that's where we'll be for the next several minutes. So Jesus begins now to try to turn them from this, what he calls the food that perishes, the physical food, to the food that endures, everlasting life, the spiritual side. So he's trying to get them to flip from this, the food he fed them physically, and start thinking spiritually, which is what he's after with them. He tells somebody to do this, you need to believe on the one who the Father sent. I got the word he up here on the screen. It's really the Father, on the one he, the Father, sent. So to get this food, to be the spiritual side you need to be, you need to start that by believe it, which will be Jesus. I mean, believing on him. He did. And so that's what he started talking about. But then they come back and ask for a sign. Here they want a sign. What sign will you give us? Well, how many signs have they already seen? How much healing has Jesus done? They just got through feeding this crowd of 5,000 plus people. So how many signs do they need to see before they believe? And they bring up more than once in this chapter about the manna. It says, we know who Moses was, essentially what they're trying to say. We know who Moses was because he gave our fathers the bread from heaven, speaking about the manna in the wilderness. So we know who Moses was. We can relate to him being from God because he gave our fathers bread from heaven. Jesus tells them, and this statement here has really got, to me, it's got 2 points to it. He said, Moses didn't give you that food, or didn't give your fathers that food. And that's kind of a rebuttal type thing there. But he said, my Father gives you the true bread. What he's trying to say is my Father is the one that gave you your fathers the bread and the manna in the wilderness. It wasn't Moses. I know it was through Moses, I understand that. But he's trying to make a point to him that it wasn't really Moses, it was my Father who did that. He said, my Father is also the one who gives you the true bread from heaven now. Again, relating himself as the Son of God. They don't understand that. Jesus came to give life. And that's the point he's trying to get to them. Now he's convinced them enough about this bread from heaven that we want some of that type thing. Which reminds me of John chapter 4. When Jesus was talking to the woman at the well, and he got around to talking from the physical water to the living water, what did she say? What did you want? I want some of this living water. Why? So I got to come back here and draw water every day, right? Give me this living water. Well, why are they wanting this bread he's talking about now? They're not convinced of the spiritual side yet. They think it's some special bread that's going to take care of them physically. So it's still, to me, it's that same relationship here between this living water, and she didn't understand. They don't understand right now what he's talking about, this bread that he's talking about. So he tells me in verse 35, I'm the bread of life, one of the I ams of the book of John. I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall never hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst. And they don't understand it yet. He's got to keep going and keep plowing it to them. So look at verse 37. Who did Jesus tell them that the Father would give to him? The Father's going to give me who? Verse 37. All that will come to me, okay? Which reminds us then of Matthew chapter 11 we've already looked at. The Father's going to give me all who will come to me. What Jesus tells them in the last part of Matthew chapter 11. Come to me. Come to me, all you who are burdened and heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. So that same thing. We're going to see in a minute how this Father drawing takes place here. So we'll get a little deeper into it. So God wants everyone to come to Jesus and be raised up at the last day. Now, what does he mean when he says he came down from heaven? That's what they're trying to figure out. What does he mean he came down from heaven? We got the same problem here now we had back in Nazareth. Why did people in Nazareth not believe him? Well, we know him. He's a carpenter. He grew up here among us. He played with all the other boys in the neighborhood and whatever. Well, they got this same thing. What do you mean you came down from heaven? You were born a little baby, and you grew up, and we know your father, we know your mother. How'd you come down from heaven? It just doesn't make sense to him. So he puts this statement in that God does not compel or force anyone to come to him. He's trying to get them to understand. You got to do it on your own. But he does draw them. Jesus said, if I'm lifted up from the earth, I'll draw them into me. He gives us special reasons to be drawn to him. So the question then next is, how is one drawn to God? How does one get this come, as he's talking about here? And that's in verse 45, I believe it is. Verse 45. How is one drawn to God? How are we drawn to God? Verse 45. Yeah. Hear the word. We're taught. Okay. Look at the words there. It says we're taught. Those who have heard. Those who have learned. Verse 45. Those are the ones who are drawn to God. So how are we drawn to God? By the word. We're taught the word. We hear the word. We believe the word. We understand the word. We learn the word. And then we're drawn to God. It's not some special direct operation of the Holy Spirit like some people would claim to use. It's not some Calvinistic, these are the elected ones and they're the ones that's going to be saved. No. The word's going to draw us. The word's going to draw them. When you hear it and we understand it and we obey it, believe it. So, he says in verse 47, that he who believes in me. So we hear this word, we learn of it, and we believe it, and we believe in him, verse 47. And the Greek here in this believe, the way it's worded, indicates this continual action. We talked about this before. It's not just a one-time, I believe in Jesus Christ, the Son of God. No, by my life, by my actions, I continually believe. I continually profess my belief in who he is. Okay. So now we come down to what may be the more difficult part of this chapter, at least for me. Johnny's going to read for us verses 51 through 58. So look at that while he reads it, and we'll talk about that. Okay. You're standing there in this crowd and you're listening to this man, we'll say, teach. He starts talking about you eating his flesh and drinking his blood. And what's going through their minds? What's going through our minds when we think about this? If you read through here. He said, I'm the living bread. First he said, I'm the bread of life. Now he said, I'm the living bread that came down from heaven. Now they still haven't comprehended it's coming down from heaven yet. He's going to give him a contrast for that just in a minute. But he says, the bread is my flesh. And the blood is the drink. You're going to eat my flesh and drink my blood. So how do we eat his flesh and drink his blood? And I don't think he's talking about the Lord's Supper. But some people would relate this to. Now, indirectly, yes, and we'll see that in a minute. But that's not the eating the flesh and drinking the blood he's talking about. So how do we eat his flesh and drink his blood? How did they eat his flesh and drink his blood? Verse what? Yeah, verse 47, you say? Yeah, 47 also ties down to 58. When he says, eat this bread, he'll live forever, right? So, we went through how I see this and how I think it relates. The parallel has been to partaking or eating of the manna in the wilderness. They bring it up a couple of times in this chapter. God provided through Moses the manna in the wilderness for us, from our fathers. Why? To preserve physical life. Okay? So the parallel is the partaking or eating the manna in the wilderness to preserve physical life. Now, we partake of, or we eat, his death, that is his flesh and blood, to preserve spiritual life. So they keep relating to the physical side. He's trying to transfer it over to the spiritual side. So the parallel he's drawing, what they've been bringing up, is the manna, which preserved physical life for their fathers in the wilderness. He said, you're going to partake of my flesh and blood through my death for your spiritual life. He was about to give his life, his flesh and blood, to them and to us for everlasting life. That's just in verse 47, and also mentioned in verse 58. The everlasting life is the key. That's what he's after. So it's up to them to eat, to partake of that, just like it's up to us to eat or partake of it. So how do we partake of his death? We don't eat his physical flesh and blood. His blood's poured out. I mean, I'm not going to drink his blood. So how are we going to eat his flesh and drink his blood? Well, by partaking of his death. How do we become in that relationship with his death? That's what's going to preserve them through their spiritual life eternally. Okay, somebody got some comments about that? Mike, go ahead. Yeah, okay. Well, that's what I said earlier. If you're standing in this crowd, what's this man telling us here, right? Okay. Eat my flesh and drink my blood. And
strictly forbidden in the Old Testament.
Sure, right. Yeah. The blood's poured out. You don't have anything to do with the blood, right?
So they're going to have to make the leap of faith. Most of them won't.
Right. Yeah, we'll find out in a minute. Most of them they don't get it. They don't understand what he's talking about. They're going to leave and go away. Jeff?
The key, I believe, is verses 56 and 57.
Okay.
Like, for example, Catholicism, they say something mystical called transubstantiation.
Sure.
In your Eucharist, the bread becomes his flesh and the cup, the wine becomes his blood. And that's foreign to the scripture. There's nothing magical or mystical about
Sure.
it. Jesus just simply says, he who eats my flesh and drinks my blood abides in me, and I in him. As the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so he who eats me, he also shall live because of me. It's a relationship. So when we do his will, we listen to his teaching, and we keep his commandments.
And we associate with his death.
Well, that's where it culminated, yes,
Right.
with all his teaching.
Sure.
Then we are abiding in him, and in essence, he's saying, you'll live because you're doing my will and you're doing my Father's will, then you are in essence eating my flesh and drinking my blood. I think that's basically what he's saying.
Yeah. Agree. So, when they related again to the physical, and Mike says, for them to get that jump from that physical to what he's trying to tell them, most of them aren't going to do it. We'll see here in just a minute. They're just not going to get that thing. But I think the flesh and blood comes in again, but we have to baptize into his death. And as Jeff says, we live according to that. Yes, ma'am. James, go ahead.
I think
Wait a minute. Go ahead, James. Go ahead. Yeah, which goes back to the same point that Jeff's making exactly. Yeah. We abide in him by keeping his commandments, which is the exact point that Jeff made from verse 56 and 57. Rebecca?
and I think what Mike was pointing out is this was calculated to drive away the
Yeah, here's where we go. That's the very next thing here. Okay. How they react to it. That's what you're getting at. This is hard. This is harsh. It's offensive. Like what Mike says over here. That's what that word. This is the hard saying. If you go back and look at what the commentators say the word there means, there's some of the definitions for it. It's rough, harsh. It's offensive. We don't partake of his blood and flesh. I mean, physically. I mean, again, hard time with that. So, yeah. So those who understand are going to understand. Those who don't, look at this. Now, Jesus has stated, and he tries to get them to understand this. Jesus has stated he came down from heaven. They don't understand that because they saw him grow up. So he asked them a question. What if you saw me return to heaven? Now, they won't see him. The apostles will see him return to heaven. But would that be more convincing to you? We're just trying to say, I will ascend to heaven. I will return to heaven. So put away this physical, fleshly thing and think spiritual. Think eternal life. That's what I'm trying to give you. And now, back to the point that's been made. Some are going to believe, and some are not. Again, it's mentioned in the text that the Father will draw them. We've already talked about that. Now, Rebecca said, many turn away. Why? Why do many turn away? I don't know all the whys. Physical food. He's not here to give them physical food. Not going to be their king. They're not ready to understand who he really is. They don't comprehend that yet. So it says they leave. His popularity is going to start dying out somewhat now. So then in verse 66, he comes to this point where he says, many of the disciples went back and walked with him no more. Now, would that be disheartening to him? You would think so. It would be to us from a physical standpoint. So he turns to the apostles, turns to the 12, and says, do you want to go away too? They're all leaving. Are you going to leave? And we'll put the other verse first. Peter said, Lord, who am I going to go? You got the words of eternal life. So Peter said, what's the other choice? Either we go to you, where are we going to go otherwise? Because you've got eternal life. Remember on the boat, truly, you are the Son of God. Remember what Peter's going to say down the road just here in chapter 16? When he confesses Christ there. So at least words-wise, they're beginning to see it. Now, I don't know how deep it is in their hearts yet. Yes, sir.
I might say that what Jesus said and how he said it was true.
Yeah. Yeah. That point in a minute. Because Peter says here, we have come to believe and know that you are the Christ. Believe and know that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And as I was working on this thing and thinking about this, to whom shall we go? You know, we have that same question for us today. And we're going to go to the big popular, the world, think about the world. Oh, that's too far. They go to the world. They go to the big preachers in the big mega churches. Or they go to what they want to do, or they go to this particular preacher, or they go to this particular teaching, or they go, where we got to go? Where did Peter say we got to go? You, Lord, you have the words of eternal life. That's who we go to. I think that same thing, what do you think about that with us? Because outwardly we went, oh no, I'd never go. But where are we going to go? Go to Christ. So now, moving back to Matthew chapter 15 right quick and get a couple more things here. The Pharisees criticized Jesus. And they do that in talking to him about the temple and taking care of parents. And it really comes down to tradition versus commandment. So the question is it wrong to give to God? Well, the answer is obviously no. Is it wrong to make a vow or a promise to give to God? Well, again, the answer is no. Okay. So what was the commandment of God relating to this parents versus the temple? Well, the command was honor your father and your mother. So what was the Pharisee tradition? You can take what you would have used to help your father and mother and you can give it to the temple. Tradition. So, which should have precedence? Which one were they giving precedence to? They were giving precedence to the tradition. Of course, the commandment of God should have precedence. So the question, and we talked about this before, I almost spent a lot of time on it this morning, is do we have traditions? You know, do we have traditions about the midweek Bible study? What day it's going to be on? Do we have traditions about the times we're going to meet on Sunday? Do we have traditions about how many songs we're going to sing? You know, got 2 songs before the Lord's Supper, a song of prayer, another song. And if you don't do that, I mean, if you sing 3 songs, I mean, somebody's going to get, what's wrong? What's the danger with these traditions we have here? We get the same danger that the Pharisees had gotten to. What are they doing? They ignore the commandment of God, and the traditions are becoming binding. They're giving the precedence to the wrong one. We need to be careful. That same thing. So, look at verses 8 and 9. These people draw near to me with their mouth, they honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain they worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. Verse 9. Vain worship. Why? What are they teaching? The commandments of men. As much as I looked at that verse Thursday when I was going through this, I said, just stared at that. And finally, I took my little border off of that verse and I put it back up here on this verse. People draw near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips. We give all this mouth worship to God. But what's wrong? In their case, it was not eating with unwashed hands that would defile them. It was having what? An unwashed heart. And that's the same word you got back in this verse. The heart's in the wrong place. We use our mouth to praise God. We use our mouth to go through the motions here, and we are giving us worship, and we're singing, and we're whatever. It's all lip service. Where's our heart? All right. That was the first retirement. Bethsaida and come back across. Second time now, he's going to go to the regions of Tyre and Sidon. Move on, get one more little thing in here. All right, on the map, Sea of Galilee's way down here. So we've got to get you positioned here. So we've been doing a lot down in here. Now we're, Sea of Galilee's here. Here's Dan. Remember from Dan to Beersheba, the length of the land. Well, here's Dan. This is the very northern edge of what we considered Israel up here. Well, here's Tyre and here's Sidon, up on the Phoenician coast. Okay, way up here. Not Israelite cities. So that's where Jesus is going to go now to get away from the crowds. When he gets there, there's this lady, a Gentile, a non-Jewish, that has a daughter who has an evil spirit, a demon. And she comes up to him, and she knows who he is. Have mercy on me, son of David. Wants him to heal her daughter. Well, Jesus refuses to do it at first. Why? Because she's a Gentile. He came to the house of Israel this time. So she tells him a little story-like thing. It says, yes, I know you did, but what do the dogs get? The dogs get the crumbs that fall from the master's table. So she worships him and said, Lord, help me, and he grants her request. And in contrast to that little faith that he accuses his apostles of having so many times, what does it say about this woman, this non-Jewish woman? Woman, great is your faith. Great is your faith. Again, he wasn't on the mission to the Gentiles, at least not at this point in time. All right, one more thing. I don't know if we have time for this or not. Stuck it in. Back in Mark chapter 7, talking about this heart relationship here. From within, out of the heart of men proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lewdness, evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All these are evil things. All these are evil things which defile a man. Now, here's a question. Let's think about me and you. Think about us. How many of y'all think about murder? How many of us think about murder? I don't mean murder anybody. Okay. Adulteries? Probably not. I mean, blasphemy? We wouldn't think about that. This list here. I mean, those things just pass by our minds. Do you have any evil thoughts? How about deceit? I wouldn't lie to you outright. But in a certain situation, like, would I not tell you the whole truth? Let you assume something over here? So this list of things here that are evil, we say, well, we throw out that list. That don't apply to us. Well, this is what I have to worry about. I fight pride. Look at me. And all these are evil things. Now, you may find nothing on that list there that bothers you. I don't know. As I read through that list, I said, well, I can throw out this one, I can throw out this one, I can throw out this one. But wait a minute. Maybe I need to think about this one, and this one, and this one. This is my heart I'm talking about here. All right, that's all. Comments from anybody? Yes, ma'am.
Going back to the Tyrian woman, it's interesting that even from the Old Testament, when you have examples of Ruth, Rahab, Naaman, all of these outsiders. In the New Testament, you have the Roman centurion, you have Cornelius, the Tyrian, Lydia. All of these people are very far outside of God's chosen people. And God keeps coming back to, let me start with my people. But then he brings these people in as examples. And it's kind of an example to us of this arrogance and blindness that comes with considering yourself as already chosen. Because then, as Christ talked about before, you don't feel like you need a physician because you feel like you're already well, but it's those who know that they are sick, the Tyrian, the Romans, the outsiders, that recognize their need.
Yeah. And that's why I have to look at myself and say, yeah, I got some problems. Let me work on them. I'm 100% yet. And like the next lesson, we're going to talk about that very thing of being perfect. It's going to come up there. That's what we're trying to strive for. It's perfection. Don't make me better than I was yesterday. Make me perfect. That's what I want to be. I think that's I've already looked ahead to the next lesson. I'm getting too mixed up. I think it's in the next lesson. We'll talk about that. Okay. Thank you much.